Good evening. I'm the City Councilor Todd Kobus, and this is the 17th of our Attleboro coronavirus video conferences. Tonight, joining us, we have Congressman-elect Jake Auchincloss, we have Police Chief Kyle Hegney, State Representative Jim Hawkins, State Senator Paul Feeney, and City Councilor Kathleen DeSimone. So welcome everybody. This is the 17th of these Attleboro coronavirus video conferences that we're doing. And today I'd like to focus a little bit more broadly and hear about some things that are going on at the federal level, and also provide for an introduction of Congressman-elect Jake Auchincloss. So Jake, welcome. How are you?
I'm well. I appreciate you having me, Councilor Kobus.
Yeah. So first and foremost, can you introduce yourself? And by the way, congratulations on the election. That's great news.
Yes, I am the Congressman-elect for the Massachusetts 4th, succeeding Joe Kennedy, a Newton City Councilor, a former Marine officer, worked in business for 5 years as well, bring a record of getting results and bringing people together to get things done in the military and business and local government. And I'm looking forward to doing that at the federal level on behalf of the constituents of the 34 cities and towns of this district.
How's it? You said the Marines?
Yes.
I'm sorry. As an Army guy, so I feel obligated to.
We'll have to resolve that offline.
Sounds good. So with regard to COVID in Massachusetts, sort of, what are your thoughts regarding where we are right now in the state and nationally?
Well, there's bad news and there's good news, and the critical question is how we get from the bad to the good. The bad news is that cases are surging. In some ways, we are in worse condition from a public health perspective today than we were even in April. Nationally, there have been, in Massachusetts, there have been 250,000 cases, 11,000 deaths. Attleboro, I know, is in the red with a high positivity rate. Things are not good right now from a public health perspective, from a percent positivity perspective, from the number of cases and hospitalizations. The good news is that we have a vaccine that works. One senior public health official in Washington described it as, quote, a grand slam, the vaccine efficacy rates of north of 90%. This thing's going to work. But it's going to take us months to get from a vaccine to a vaccination. That's going to require a significant national logistics effort. It's going to require that we triage which parts of the population get the vaccine. It's going to take time. So how do we get from where we are now to herd immunity and based on the vaccine? I think it's going to be a mixture of personal responsibility and government action. At the personal responsibility level, folks need to wear masks. Wear masks anytime they're outside of their own quarters. Physically distance and limit contact outside of your household. We're all exhausted by it. I'm exhausted from it. I know everyone on this call is exhausted from it. It's grim, not fun. It flattens and removes the texture from a lot of our daily life, but we've got to chug along for a few more months doing this. At the government level, at the federal level in particular, we need to attack the virus, I think, from three different angles. One is the public health perspective, increase testing, increase contact tracing, and of course, make sure that we have the distribution for the vaccine. We need to provide relief for state and local government because budgets are going to be hard hit. And then finally, we need to provide relief for working families directly who are bearing the brunt of this economic recession.
Outstanding. And so how are things going with the transition from Congressman Kennedy to yourself? How is that progressing? And are there particular things that, as it relates to Massachusetts and with COVID-19 that you're working on?
Well, Congressman Kennedy is a class act. He's been tremendously helpful in ensuring we have the smoothest possible transition. I won't go into all the kind of mechanics of how you transfer over the computers and the office space and the leases, but at every step of the way, it is as seamless as possible because Congressman Kennedy just puts constituents first, as I do, and we both know our constituents are best served by having a seamless handoff. I think Attleboro residents will be pleased to know that the inimitable Lisa Nelson will be staying on to help with the transition. And to help train up the next district director because Lisa Nelson just simply is the best. We're also going to be keeping our district office in Attleboro. I think that's a good location for it, and people can expect to find that district up and running, just as it was for Joe Kennedy.
Outstanding. That's great to hear. And then you started talking about having the vaccine and the next few, just holding out for a few more months. What are your expectations for sort of the first half of 2021? And I know it's early to be talking about it, but it is hard to know what's going to happen. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's going to be a hard winter. I think I owe it to my constituents, and we all owe it to our constituents to be realistic about what we're facing. This is going to be a hard winter because we are in a hard public health perspective right now. It's going to be a better spring. It's going to be a better spring because we're going to distribute this vaccine, and we are going to have the public health infrastructure necessary to get people vaccinated against the coronavirus, such that 2021 will be a better year than 2020 was. As I said earlier, that requires not just personal responsibility, though, to get us through this winter. It also requires government action. And COVID response, recovery, and relief is my #1 priority. So much so that I've actually started working on this even before swearing in on January 3rd. I last week was in the office of the Chair of Appropriations in Washington, D.C., making a strong case for enhanced stimulus dollars going to working families and state and local governments. Because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the lockdowns and the physical distancing are actually affecting people's livelihoods and lives. And we've got to get relief for these folks. There looks to be a promising, potentially around $900 billion secondary stimulus package coming out next week. Now that's the previous Congress. I'm not actually going to be voting on that, but of course I'm monitoring it closely. That's likely to have some more money for testing and some money directly to stimulate the economy and to help people who are in need, but it's unclear exactly what the contours of that are. My direct focus while I'm in transition has been on the K-12 public schools. In fact, I was talking to the Attleboro superintendent about this earlier this week, and we provided some information about access to high quality pooled testing that can increase confidence of parents, teachers, students about the safety of the schools, because I'm concerned, and I know many people are concerned, that even the hybrid system that we have now for educating kids may be at risk if cases continue to surge. And we need to have testing in place that provides confidence and a baseline that shows that there's not a spread.
Right, and I love that you talked about the upcoming stimulus bill. And as a city councilor in Newton and familiar with municipal budgets, I appreciate keeping an eye on that and looking at that, because that's what I'm concerned about here in Attleboro on a regular basis.
Well, and as you know, municipal budgets are lagging indicators of hard times.
Absolutely.
2020 is not going to be the hardest year for local budgets. And in fact, 2021 might not even be the hardest year. It might be 2022. I know the state is thinking that way. And that is deeply concerning. And we need federal officials to keep their eyes open. Just because, we may have vaccinations and we may have the stock market doing well again does not mean that local budgets aren't going to be needing serious assistance. And I've certainly got my eyes wide open about that.
That's great. And I'm very happy that you mentioned that. That's something we've been talking about on the council floor on a regular basis. We may have had a fairly large surplus this year because a number of things school was canceled and for a number of reasons last year, but next year and potentially the year after are going to be challenging, to say the least. So I appreciate you mentioning that and appreciate you keeping an eye on it. So
absolutely.
Can I mention?
Sure.
You should get credit, Jake, because I recall a cell phone conversation with you a couple of weeks ago, and I was looking for all kind of stuff. But before I could finish, you had things to offer us, particularly the conversation with the superintendent of schools. You're definitely hitting the ground running, and I want to compliment you for that.
I appreciate that, Representative Hawkins. And we've had further conversations with the superintendent, and I'm here to be a resource in any way possible to ensure that kids can stay in school to the extent that's safe and viable for each individual locality. And the Attleboro superintendent is clearly doing his utmost and is doing his best job. So
I appreciate it. And one of the things that sort of struck me in reading the news last night and talking, work with a number of people in California and in Southern California, they just enacted a shelter-in-place order because the ICU units fell below, was it 15% or so, some percentage. And so they're getting hit hard, really hard in Southern California. And the question is, are we going to see a similar third wave or whatever wave?
Right.
And so, so with that said, those were all the questions I had. Did you have anything else you wanted to share or communicate? And I really appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciate you having me and giving me this opportunity to continue the conversation with my constituents in Attleboro. And I want folks to know there that I'm going to be as accessible as is possible in this era of Zoom. And once we're able to do in-person events, they can count on me being in Attleboro and meeting people in person, because there's no replacement for that. And it's really the best way to build the relationships that are going to be critical to me.
Outstanding. And again, sorry that it was the Marine Corps for you, but thank you so much for joining, Congressman Auchincloss. And I respect that your time is incredibly, you're a busy person, so feel free to drop off if you want to, but we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm going to hang out for a couple of minutes and listen to some of my colleagues here, but I may have to drop off in a few minutes if my son wakes up from his evening nap. So,
how many kids do you have?
I have one right now, 8 months.
Old.
Teddy, 8 months old.
Oh, congratulations! That's awesome. All right, next up we have Chief Hegney. Chief Hegney, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Sir, how are you?
Outstanding, outstanding. So it's been a while since we've talked. How have things been going with the police department?
Good, good. We've been faring well through COVID. Not as bad as the fire department. We've been hardening our defense, so it hasn't penetrated too much into our department. We've only had 2 members out of a total of almost 100 employees in the building, so only 2 have come down with COVID, which is fortunate. One was during, and one is happening right now. Numerous employees have gone and gotten tested, come back negative. Some had signs of where it turned out to be the ordinary flu. So we've had some staffing level issues here and there, depending on how many people are out tested, being tested, wait for the test to come back. We've also have people that are venturing on vacations and what have you. So the city policy is that you have to have a test or a 2-week period of isolation before you come back. So, but I commend him and strong on it, and he's been up in front, keeping COVID really well in our city and government buildings and what have you. So, and the support of the city council has been fabulous. So, but the men and women of the police department should be commended also, because they've taken it serious. And when you're on the front line and only 2 people have come down with it, they should give a tip of the hat for what they're doing.
That's incredible. And I know the firefighters had been in the newspapers a lot, and was it roughly 20% of the firefighters have had COVID, or yeah, I believe it's 20 out of 100 or close to that.
We're north of 20 now.
Yeah, so that's so it's great to hear that you guys are faring a little bit better, but you, like you said, you are on the front lines, and if there's anything you guys need, definitely reach out.
I'll take 25 more employees. That'd be nice.
Done. But is there anything you want to communicate to the public as far as what they need to know over the holidays and whatnot?
It's difficult with the whole constitutionality of the COVID enforcement. Obviously, the health department is the primary enforcement of COVID. The police department's a secondary enforcement. We've been receiving numerous calls of people walking in the stores and not wearing a mask. Basically, it's like 1% of our community, if you will, or even our society is non-compliant. But those 1%ers are 1%ers in other categories also that they will not follow rules and the laws of our Commonwealth. We deal, on a case-by-case basis, first with education. The constitutionality of the governor's order is interesting, vetted by the court. So that's why we're looking for cooperation. There is no MGL on mask laws and social distancing and what have you. So for the most part, 99% of the time, it's been fantastic. You do have some people that just unwillingly will not cooperate, and people's lives at risk. But we get through it on a day-to-day basis and take deep breaths, and hopefully this to us stern pretty quick. Hopefully, I know our crime numbers are back to especially domestics. Mental health calls are through the roof. Identity theft the numbers are racking up. The unemployment fraud is simply amazing. It's just unbelievable how many. I've been a victim of it myself. Somebody filed on my so I don't think I'm going anywhere. But
somebody had filed an unemployment claim for me as well as ordered a refrigerator to somewhere in Georgia. But I was able to cancel it and then sent a glitter bomb to him. So that was.
Kyle, you probably get double on the unemployment, because what happens, I'm getting hammered with people waiting for their unemployment in the office. But what happens if you already have a claim and somebody uses your name again, that claim gets frozen too. So you get like double reports. And I know I got hacked. I got 2. So it's like it's all over the place.
I think we're up to only 25 members that have their identity stolen through the unemployment scams. But the Amazon scams, those doubled from last year. We put the warning out last week in the paper. The media has been fantastic getting that message out. But as the brick and mortar stores are used less and less, especially during this holiday season, and Amazon and the new Ali line portal, it's getting tougher and tougher. And as new technology emerges, these criminals adapt and use that to their advantage and to catch up. So it's been interesting. The advent of the computer crimes detector has been outstanding. It's been very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And so Jim Hawkins, when we get to you, I'd like to talk about the unemployment a little bit. If you could look up that the web address for filing a claim to or to report fraud, that'd be useful. Chief Agnew, anything else to add and communicate to the people? Anything that they should be doing to try to counteract some of these things?
Well, the unemployment is what it is. I mean, that's going to happen. The state's doing the best they can to close that loophole gap with the identity. But as long as they use that link you just mentioned and they can put an end to it before there's any serious damage done. Like I always said, with any type of fraud, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Especially with these emails and phishing scams and Trojan horses, and the elderly is usually the first to be preyed upon. We always tell if they're getting phone calls, we always tell our senior citizens, verify, stop, verify, get a number, call back, have somebody with you. The scams of the cards, going to the stores, getting 100, 200, 500, putting on the cards and sending them the passwords, scratching off the back of the cards and sending them off the passwords. Those scams are through the roof. It really upsets how they're taking advantage of the elderly. It's just interesting how we come into this world naive and we leave the world naive, but it shouldn't be that way. It's sad how they're just scamming them left and right every single day.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for everything you and the entire police department have been doing. I know there was a lot of fanfare early on in this for first responders and medical personnel. But yeah, want to communicate that we very much still appreciate everything you guys are doing out there and recognize that it's the pandemic is continuing on and you continue to fight on the front lines of it. So thank you.
I appreciate it, because even during a pandemic, crime doesn't end. And in some categories, it keeps going up and up. So we're adjusting, and I think the men and women are doing a fabulous job. We'll continue in that professional category and keep moving ahead. So I thank you for your support, the mayor's support, the city council support. You guys have been fabulous. And if you see a police officer out there, I'd appreciate it if you just say thank you.
Perfect. All right. Next up, we have Senator Paul Feeney. Paul, I love the Christmas tree.
Thank you, Councilor Kovas. When we started this, I think I had the St. Patrick's decorations behind
I think
me.
so. Yeah.
Here we are 17 meetings later. But it's always good to join you and have a conversation about this pandemic. And, you know, we've gone through the ringer, obviously, over the last, better part of 9 months, where we've talked a lot about the pandemic and the public health implications and, obviously the budget and public safety, Chief Agony, Chief LaChance, and the things that they're dealing with. As the chief just said, right, these things don't go away because of a pandemic. It just becomes a lot more difficult to deal with it. And there's a lot more challenges for both of their departments and, and the people in the front lines in the hospitals. And certainly we've heard from Sturdy Hospital. We heard from them last week talking about some of the obstacles that they're facing. So it's always good to join you, have this conversation. It's not always good news. I think the only bit of good news I can give tonight is that the Patriots are winning 45-0 right now, which
I saw that. I can't believe we have to have this meeting right now.
That's right. That's right. Well, we're dedicated public servants, but this is a good night, and to see Congressman-elect Auchincloss, who not only did he have a new baby during his campaign, but had to figure out a way to get out and talk to people and campaign for a significant office like the United States Congress in the midst of a public health crisis. But then to have to transition and turn that from campaigning into, how we're going to govern, I think is a testament to him and his character. And, certainly he's been very involved and engaged with us in Attleboro and in my district and the Bristol and Norfolk district. So, the big thing is when you deal with a crisis like this, it does reveal your character. I think a lot of people have come together at all different levels to try and figure this out. As we've said many times, Councilor Kovas, there is no playbook from this, from, you and Councilor DeSimone that's on this call, and the police chiefs and the mayor, and, certainly as legislators, we've been trying to figure this out as we go along. So I think we've gotten smarter, hopefully, when it comes to the science about this pandemic, since the onset, since it hit our shores. But we certainly have a lot of challenges ahead of us when it comes to the mitigation and how we're going to deal with some of the adverse impacts, to our budget and to the economy and to folks that are feeling a lot of pain right now, economically and otherwise, through unemployment, as Rep. Hawkins mentioned, and all the other things, losing their businesses, losing income. So it's been a challenge. But Todd, I just want to take a couple minutes. One of the things that we've done now for 17 weeks is kind of given a snapshot of where we are, so people understand, as a Commonwealth, where we are as it relates to the public health issues, and then to just kind of frame that a little bit to get into, our later discussion about mitigation and some of the other things that are happening. And I say this, and I always want to kind of use this disclaimer, but especially now after hearing Councilor DeSimone last week, really offer testimony about a very personal issue for her and how she dealt with this in her family with COVID-19 and the fear that she experienced and that so many other people are experiencing. We talk about numbers, and sometimes it's easy to lose sight of the fact that these are people. And I think when we get into this conversation about COVID and we talk about, well, so many people died today, that's down from last week or up from a month ago. Those are people, those are human beings. And oftentimes, those are people that are in a circumstance where they're suffering alone, where they can't see their families, where you can't have a loved one come in and just hold your hand. So I always want to mention that because, we talk about numbers a lot, and I don't want that to harden us from understanding that these are people dealing with these challenges. So, but with that, as a quick snapshot of where we are, we've had a rough week since we met last week, Todd. About 4,757 new cases reported today. The 7-day average positivity is at 5.34%, which is up from 3.8% the last time we spoke. Remembering that these indicators are probably more important than the raw numbers because it shows where the trend line is going, and that's hugely important in this issue. The estimated active cases of COVID right now stand at 57,304. That's up again last week from 43,709, which was, we were setting previous records last week. Right now in the Commonwealth, there's about 1,416 patients in the hospital. That's up from a little over 1,000 from last week. And there's 298 confirmed COVID patients in the ICU, which shows the severity of the illness. And that's up about 60 people from last week.
With regard to that, and I mentioned earlier about the shelter in place order for Southern California.
Yeah.
Do we have anything similar to that in Massachusetts? And is there sort of a threshold that triggers such a thing? And apologies for putting you on the spot with that.
No. That's the conversation that all of us are having, especially policymakers at the state level. Mm-hmm. And I've said it here before. As legislators, we don't have the ability to unilaterally make these decisions, right? We have a governor, and the Constitution allows him to make these decisions, and his administration to make these decisions. What we've asked for, and what I urge, and I know Representative Hawkins and others in the Attleboro delegation have urged, is show us what those benchmarks are. So if we hit a certain percentage, does that trigger a certain, mitigation action? It's been a little bit, kind of put together as we've gone along over the last year. So there's nothing I can point to that says if we get to a certain red area, it's going to trigger these activities. We do know that happens on a municipal level when a community goes into a red zone or a yellow zone or a green zone. That means certain things, and it means the schools have to start to act. It means, it triggers the COVID enforcement and intervention team, which the chief is familiar with. When a community goes into the red zone, the Commonwealth will reach out and say, what do you need help with? Do you need help with enforcement? There's been, the ABCC, which is our alcohol enforcement division in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They will go to communities and say, do we have a problem at restaurants? Do we have a problem at certain bars? They'll reach out to the mayor or to the authority having jurisdiction and say, can we help with messaging? So, those types of things are triggered when you hit to certain levels. But as far as a shutdown, I hear every single week new rumors from people that say, all right, Feeney, I heard it. Massachusetts is shutting down in 3 days. Can you just give me a heads up when that's going to happen? And, ultimately, they've just been rumors that haven't been true. But I know that there's a discussion about whether or not this trend continues over the next couple of weeks if we have to roll back. Perfect example on a town-by-town basis, the town of Rehoboth. Rehoboth has been in the red zone, including in the area, just like Attleboro has. But they got to a level of where the state came in and said, we're going to roll back basically the reopening plan to phase 3.1. Right, which meant that the limit on indoor gatherings and limits on certain activities that could happen in the community were reinforced. So could I see that happen on a more widespread level? I think if we continue to go in this direction, I definitely think that's going to happen. But I also know that the administration is trying to use a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer and to say, where is the problem? If the problem is community spread, can we even curb that? Are schools an issue? Are indoor gatherings an issue? Are, people going over to folks' houses and watching the Patriots on a Sunday an issue? So I think it's going to be a more targeted approach. Certainly federally, there's been discussion, especially with an incoming administration, on whether or not there's going to be a blanket approach across the country. I think there's been some resistance to that. But ultimately, from my perspective and in my opinion, as somebody who's living through this every single day on a policy side, I think we need to be as aggressive as possible, with the understanding that we can be aggressive. However, we have to make sure that there's guardrails in place for small businesses, that there's guardrails in place for restaurants, that there's guardrails in place, for others that may be adversely impacted by those decisions. So that's the conversation that's happening. The trend isn't great. The 7-day average positivity is 5.34% right now. That's up just from last week when we met at 3.8%, and up 590% from the lowest observed value, which is scary. So what I would say to that is, as we see the ICU capacity start to be, overwhelmed. I think right now it's at about 61% as of today's hospital census. When we see the ICU capacity overwhelmed, that's when we get into dangerous territory.
Mhm.
Because everybody knows if we get into a situation where, we're at surge capacity at Sturdy Hospital in Attleboro and all the regional hospitals and the Boston hospitals, we're going to get to a point where decisions are going to have to be made on how you ration those resources. Things like ventilators, right? Things like ICU beds. And that's not a situation that you want to find yourself in the United States of America. So we got to do everything we can to mitigate that. I would just wrap up with this thought. I would encourage everybody, not doing a shameless plug here, but on my Facebook page, on the Senator Paul Feeney Facebook page, I have a 30-minute interview with Dr. Rochelle Walensky. We did a Facebook Live event a couple of weeks ago. Dr. Rochelle Walensky is one of the preeminent infectious disease experts in the country. She is the chief of infectious diseases division at Mass General Hospital. She spent 30 minutes with me. And the thing I love about Dr. Walensky is she's able to take all these, all the science behind it and really break it down into simple to understand layperson's terms. So I would encourage everybody, if you have just a couple minutes, go on to my Facebook page, check out that Facebook Live interview with Dr. Walensky. She gets into the difference between this and the flu. How many people have said, Paul, this is just a flu and we don't shut down the state for that. She talks about the contagious factor, the R naught factor. She talks about how severe this is and her experiences on the front line, investigating this disease and learning really about the science of it. So I encourage you to do that, Todd. And, finally, we met months ago when we were overdue on a state budget, and you as a city councilor, and you just spoke with the congressman about this. Obviously, municipalities are looking at the next couple of fiscal years with a little bit of trepidation, and it's understood that FY21 we were able to get through. FY22 is going to be very challenging, but happy to announce that we finally got a budget to the governor just this past week. Representative Hawkins over in the House and I in the Senate voted on a package deal to go to the governor's desk. There's a lot of great things in there. We're holding municipalities harmless and level funding cities and towns across the state when it comes to local aid, so that you don't have to experience layoffs in the midst of a public health crisis. And with Chapter 70 education money, it's level funded with a little bit of an increase for inflation. So happy that we got that budget. We got through the FY21 budget. It's overdue, but we were waiting to see obviously the local receipts and the state receipts, and also what was going to happen down in Congress. I know Congressman Auchincloss is going to be advocating for a package that includes direct aid to the states. It's vitally important that we have this money going forward, because FY22 is going to be a huge challenge. So with that, I just want to thank everybody who tunes in every week and everybody who's a part of this. I think it's a good conversation, and I look forward to keeping it going in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. How about those Pats, right?
It's unbelievable. And they put Stidham in garbage time, but I think Cam Newton's found his way. So it should be an interesting end of the season. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Always a pleasure. And the thing that I was thinking about is how back in March, things like positivity rates and R naught values and whatnot weren't even part of our vocabulary, and now it's almost second nature.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's look at how many times did you see somebody with a mask in your lifetime, and it would be this abnormal thing. Right now, everybody walks around with masks. I wish more people would, but everybody walks around with masks and face coverings. It's not a big deal. And we've learned a lot. We've gone from the R naught factor. We've learned about RNA. We've learned about molecular PCR testing. We've learned about antigen testing. It's just become part of our regular vernacular. And now we're going to shift that into vaccinations. We're going to be hearing a lot about vaccinations in the coming weeks. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts just sent our plan to the federal government, hoping that in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be about 59,000 doses that'll come from the federal government to Massachusetts. And then, by the end of December, hopefully we'll have about 300,000 vaccinations. Keeping in mind, it's going to be a double dose. So we're going to need people to go out and get both shots when we do get there. But it's going to take months and months and months to get to a point where, as Congressman Auchincloss said, where we get to herd immunity from this vaccination. But a lot to learn, a lot to get through. Keep wearing your mask and, stay healthy.
But we're close. Just a few months. We just can't get complacent. We just got to kind of stick to it.
That's right.
All right. Next up, I have Representative Hawkins. Jim, welcome. Still on vacation. I see the beard's still there, right?
Yeah, and I'm still wearing Crocs too.
Love it.
I want to ask you what you're wearing. Sorry. You think I would have a good filter on even with the mask? I don't. Sorry. So the things I wanted to talk about. First of all, the Attleboro Police Association had their stuff a cruiser scheduled for Saturday, and the weather was pretty horrible, so it's been postponed until next Saturday. Either toys or donations that will go to Christmases for Kids. Christmases for Kids puts together packages for something like 1,000 kids in different families in the region. Really critical, and they've had no fundraisers, and they're being really good with COVID relations, but it's really made their mission much harder. Second thing that actually you and Senator Feeney are involved in, and Councilor Delisio and Heather Perica, is the food drive, which is also next Saturday. That's from 10 to 1. It's at the parking lot behind the YMCA on Sanford Street. It's critical. The need is actually, I keep saying this, but the need keeps getting worse. More and more people are struggling right now. And food supply is better, but there's still holes in it. There's things that the food pantries just don't have some weeks. And sometimes it gets a little lean in the food pantries. Now there's 4 food pantries in the city. There's Hebron Food Pantry, which is the one most people know about, that's across the street from the Y. There's Murray there on Tuesday morning, Wednesday night, and Thursday night. Murray Church has a food pantry on Monday morning and Thursday morning. St. Teresa's has a food pantry in South Attleboro on Wednesday morning, and St. Joe's Food Cellar has a food pantry on Friday night. So there's food available in different parts of the city most every morning and most every night through the week. So there is food available, but they're all working close. So anything that you could bring the city, every time we've had one of these before, people in the city have been incredibly generous. It would be non-perishable food, canned items, pasta, macaroni and cheese, anything like that, personal care items, even pet food. Some people are struggling with pet food. The wisdom is if somebody can't pay their rent, they should be taking advantage of the food that's available and use the money for what bills don't go away. And we're doing our best. The lines have gotten so long. We're used to this since March. This is nothing new, but sometimes the food bank runs out of things. And then the food pantry doesn't have those items. Something to think about, if you don't want to go to the store, if you would make a cash donation, that actually goes further. Because anything you give in terms of cash, you give them $1, that'll buy $10 worth of food from the food pantry. So it's not quite as fancy as bringing in a bag of food, but it actually goes further. You're not being lazy at all. That's actually, we get big, if not we, the food pantries get big bang for the bucks out of any cash donations you make.
That's great. It's incredibly important.
Well, you never take credit for anything you do, including the 17 of these Zooms. But you've been a big. It's me and Senator Feeney and you and Jay Delisio and Heather Perica that have just always come through with this and make these things happen when it's needed. Attleboro Police Association took it up for us for a couple of times when we just couldn't do it. So it's been a pretty consistent monthly food pantry through the pandemic.
More importantly, it's wonderful to see the residents come out and be so supportive of these sort of things. It just come out in mass and be incredibly supportive. So it's always touching for me to see that and personally rewarding. One of the questions I had for you, especially now that it's getting colder, I know you're involved with the homeless and
Yep.
What's that situation look like here in Attleboro, and what's going on there?
Well, long term, we're looking for a piece of real estate, which there's certain places where it probably wouldn't be appropriate. And real estate, when it goes on the market, is gone like within hours, which is making it a little more difficult. We looked at a couple locations earlier that we spent some time researching, and they weren't gonna work out. So that's a small hiccup, though. We have a really good team. Since we started, we now are partnered with NeighborWorks and Father Bill's in Mainspring and Catholic Social Services and Bay Coast Bank, and we have the best, most experienced people working on this. So that's, once we get that, we're back in motion. This is going to happen. It will have 18 crisis beds on the first floor. It'll have 20 permanent supported housing units on the second and third floor, which provides a transition from being on the street into permanent supported housing. Housing pays, the state is encouraging housing over crisis beds, but we still need the crisis beds. But the way we're doing this, the expenses can be shifted to the housing, and we'll still be able to have the crisis beds for short-term situations. And because of the way we're doing this, we also, it's staffed 24/7. There's on-site services for literacy, addiction, mental health. All of that will be available right on the premises. The problem is it's not going to happen for this winter. And there's a group of people at CCBC, Father Bill's in Mainspring, that are actively looking for some sort of solution, maybe with hotels, maybe with something else like that. The hurdles for actually having a cold weather shelter like was at Faith Alliance are pretty steep, and only got steeper with the COVID. So that's not likely to happen. But there's some people that are putting some serious effort into coming up with a solution in case we have a couple of really cold nights and it's not safe to sleep under the stars.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that you've got your eye on that issue there.
Well, it's given new urgency to the permanent, because some of the issues is if a lot of these had been run by volunteers, which is part of the problem. If you think about this, they got to start preparing at mid-afternoon, and it's open. They don't leave until 7 in the morning. That's like a 14 or 16-hour day. It has to be run by volunteers. They have to be trained volunteers. There's requirements as to what they do. They have to supervise these sites pretty safely. When the permanent facility is built, it's run by professionals. We don't have to look for volunteers, and it doesn't matter whether it's a cold night or a hot night or there's a heat situation. That's all taken care of. And this building was designed during COVID. One of the things that happened is Samaritan House in Taunton was there's nothing in Attleboro, North Attleboro, Norton, Foxborough, Seekonk, Rehoboth for beds. There were 18 beds in Taunton, but because this building is old, doesn't meet the current permitting stuff, the zoning requirements, it had to be reduced during COVID. They had to depopulate it. So they did have 18 beds. Now they only have 8. So in a very wide area, there's 8 beds, which is just insane. The building that we're building was designed this year. So it's designed with COVID in mind. There is distancing involved in it. There's partitions between the beds. Ventilation is appropriate. The hygiene is appropriate. The bathrooms are appropriate. That will never happen in our building, in the one in Attleboro.
Great. Thank you.
I had a couple other things. I wasn't done.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
We've been busy. Unemployment was the one you asked me about, and I think we already talked about. We've been in Senator Feeney's office also. We've been pretty steady. I thought at some point the people are going to have applied and been through the issues of glitches in the system, and that's not so. We still turn in a batch every day. So if for some reason we can't file a claim for you, but if you have a problem with it, you've been waiting too long, they sent you a message you don't understand or don't agree with, you're caught up in this fraud. If there's an issue, you should contact either my office or Senator Feeney's office, preferably by email, so I can see name and address in writing rather than just reading it from a voicemail. That would be, for mine would be james.hawkins@mahouse.gov. And I think Paul sent you the link for fraud.
He did.
In the chat, if you want to put that so where people can see it. And if you did get a fraud, you should also file a report on that. And you can also file a police report, which is what Chief Hegney was talking about. That link is in the chat. So don't sit idly by and fret, because we can help you with that. It takes a while. I think our inquiries take at least a month, so it's not fast. but you do get an authoritative answer, and we keep them filed and organized so that we can check back on one that somebody asked us something a while ago, what happened with it. We have a way of doing that, and then we know when they've been waiting longer than normal, something's wrong, and we can follow up with that. I hate to say this, but we've gotten good at it. It's a skill. It's a skill we didn't want, but we're pretty organized with those. Other thing going on, I don't remember if I mentioned this last week because I threw away my notes. MBTA service cuts, you can still send in. The decision is not going to be made until next week. Your comments as to how you use the commuter rail. I don't think many people are using it now, but when things return, how will you be using it so they can bring the service back in some way that'll be helpful to you? They have lots of data, but they want to know the human side of this, how you work a shift from 7 to 7, do you work certain hours, what are you doing, so that they can make their decisions better. The changes to exit 3 by the Shell station are moving along. Those don't seem to be influenced by COVID at all. That's not a problem. We're coordinating changes along South Ave, which was originally going to become a boulevard, maybe a little different, a little simpler project. There's going to be a traffic light at Rathbun Willard, and the one at Snell will be taken out. And at some point, the state is going to, the exit 3 is going to be repaved, and this didn't come in time to change that. But that will be squared off, so we won't have the merge ramp right in front of the gas station, making all kinds of problems. That's what I had in my notes.
All right. And people, if they need help, they can still contact projectbread.org, I believe.
Yes, right? Yes.
Yeah. So if people need assistance trying to find out what programs are available, you can go to projectbread.org.
Project Bread, and those flyers are all over now. Yes, Project Bread can help you sign up. They have, I think they speak 15 different languages, so they can walk you through the process to sign up for SNAP benefits. First of all, make sure you're eligible, and then help you with the process to sign up. And that would give you the ability, because it used to be that all the food pantries would drive up and you would get a bag full of food and you hope you like what they put in the bag. With weather, they had to transition to walk in. So I don't know about Murray Church, but the other 3, you can actually walk in, I think, and choose what you want, but they just take 1 or 2 people at a time. So it's a longer time-wise process, but you can pick what you want, but there's stuff that they don't have. So SNAP benefits would give you the benefit to get the missing pieces of what you want in your menu at home. Okay. And take some of the burden off of the food pantries too, because they are spread pretty thin.
Great. Next up, I have Steve Withers Jr., the school committee chair. Welcome, Steve. And I understand you don't have the video tonight, but yeah, that's not an issue. How's everything?
All right.
It's
we're hanging in there, Todd. Can you hear me all right without the video?
Yep, I can hear you. I was just thinking it's. I saw that you're doing this from your office. I was just thinking of that first video conference we did from your office back in March when this was
in March.
Yeah. So,
Full
how's
circle,
everything
if only
going?
it was the end. So the schools are struggling through this like everyone is, I would say. We certainly are, as Senator Feeney mentioned before, these are unprecedented times, and this is not something that school administrations or school committees were anticipating being, they're waking and breathing responsibilities and almost all that they consider on a daily basis. But that being said, I'm proud of the administration for how they've handled this and taken this full on and really addressing this so that, we can continue to educate our students as effectively as possible, to do it as safely as possible, and to really consider all the various factors that, come into play when considering whether or not schools should be open, how often they should be open, how many students we can have in a classroom and whatnot. So, I can't say enough for what the administration has done to, in getting up to speed on this and really keeping everyone informed and making decisions that I think to date have been the best decisions that could be made in in what's a really brutal situation for everyone. that being said, it's certainly an issue that we all know raises strong opinions and emotions among everyone on what we should be doing as a community, what we should be doing as a country. And the schools certainly are part of that. And so what the schools should be doing is certainly something that is on the community's mind. As of right now, the schools continue to operate in the hybrid mode as they have since the beginning of the year. As I think we all know by now, the hybrid mode is with students in the classroom 2 days a week. And then cohort A, for instance, is in school on Monday and they're in school on Thursday. Cohort B is in school on Tuesday and in school on Friday. Everyone is out of school on Wednesday. And then on your off days, you're doing remote learning. So that's the way we've operated from the beginning. We've continued to be able to do that. Not that it hasn't been without some times where we feared we would have to change how we operated, but we've been able to do that almost without exception. I do say almost without exception, of course, because last week, Brennan Middle School, we had to operate completely remote for 2 days. And that was not because of any widespread event in the school itself, but because in addition to the virus spreading throughout students and teachers, what we also have to consider is the staffing levels at the schools. And what happened is that the number of administrators and staff members who were out for a couple of days, either because they were quarantining or because they were required to get a test because of a close contact or because they actually had the virus or a family member had the virus, was so large that we just didn't have enough staff members to effectively provide in-person education. Luckily, that was a situation that, after a few staff members' test results came back and they were able to come back to the school, we were able to get the majority of Brennan back in person for Thursday and Friday of last week. So, that's the good news. The bad news and the important news, I would say, for families throughout the city to understand and keep in mind is that situation at Brennan is not necessarily unique. Brennan was the school that leading up to last week we were most concerned about on the staffing level. But, at really any school right now with the numbers we're seeing in the community, one event could really lead to a few staff members being removed from the building, in which case a certain school could have to go remote for a couple of days. So that's something we're trying to spread the knowledge of throughout the community so that families, can be aware that the possibility that their children's school could shut down for a couple of days in order for us to get proper staffing levels. So it is important for families to be aware of that. But for now, the state has made clear that to the extent we can, that they want us to have students in school. I think that that goes in line with what we're seeing nationally from scientists and governments, and also what we're seeing in Europe as well, where schools have largely continued to be held to the extent possible. I think we're all happy that while we've certainly, endured trying time here, the schools have not turned out to be, the super spreader locations and events that I think we all feared could be. Even those of us who advocated for students to be going back to school in the fall, had a fear that with so many people in close contact that schools had the possibility of being a location where this virus could spread. That does not seem to be the case so far. So I think that's one bit of good news that, that we can take out of what's happened so far. But, I think we all know that you eventually reach a critical mass, and in Attleboro as a community, we've seen the numbers are increasing on a daily and weekly basis. So it's something we'll continue to watch. But for now, we continue on keeping students in school as much as possible where, we believe they learn best and grow most effectively. And we'll continue to do that for so long as we can.
Great, thank you. One of the questions I had, and we talked about it briefly last week with Superintendent Sawyer, is, we hear about the governor, encouraging schools to go back full time and encouraging kids to go back full time. My understanding is that in Attleboro, we can't really go beyond the hybrid model. We don't have the facilities or the busing capabilities to send kids to school full time, at least for this year. Is that accurate? Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, I think that's largely accurate. I would give a little bit of nuance and caveat to it. I think the high school, it's clear right now in our current, well, even well below our current virus levels, that we just don't have the space to spread out enough that we would be able to have the high school continue, high school return to full in-person education anytime in the near future. There was hope in the fall that we may be able to do that at the lower levels. And what the administration has found out is that there's really been two areas that, in watching how school unfolds on a day-to-day basis, would present a problem if we were full in person. And those are busing, like you mentioned, and also lunch. Getting students to get their lunch, get in line to get their lunch, get to a location to be in lunch. Those two areas of the school day, which aren't necessarily areas that people think about, are areas that would be logistically certainly impossible at the current numbers, and it would be really difficult to carry out in the schools at this time. So I think the likelihood that the schools return to full in person this year is significantly lessened because of that fact. I think I've been one of the louder proponents for trying to get students back as much as possible, as soon as possible, when it's safe to do so. But even from that position, I understand that those two logistical concerns are going to create a major hurdle for the schools, even when we reach virus levels where people might be thinking, okay, why aren't we back fully in person? Well, because there are other items that we have to consider from a logistical administrative standpoint, where we just can't keep students far enough apart to be able to comply with the guidelines that are being put in place and that have been lessened to a certain extent by the state in order to try and get students back in schools. We still couldn't comply with those watered down guidelines at this point.
All right. Anything else to share with the public? It's good to hear from you. And I know you have a school committee meeting tomorrow night. Anything coming up that people should be aware of and be on the lookout for?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I think tomorrow night's meeting, like all of our meetings this year, will be essentially dominated by this topic. I think a few things that'll be on the agenda is, like I mentioned, the fact that there are several schools, or really the entire district, that are close to where Brennan was before, where getting that message out that, there's a possibility your student's school will be, have to close for a few days, something that I think we're going to be continuing to hammer home, because we understand the inconvenience that it causes when school is canceled for families. And we, in a situation where we can't give advance notice, we want people to at least be aware that this possibility is on the horizon. Another thing that that's going to be considered is we talked about is sports for the winter season. The state has pretty much said all systems go for sports for the winter seasons, but is leaving it up to districts. I think there's some concerns, certainly with some of the winter sports being inside, being a little bit more contact heavy, on whether or not it makes sense to be having those sports be held when they could be impacting the ability to have education. So that's definitely a discussion I would encourage the public to listen to, because it's something that I know a lot of us are really digging into and struggling with. And I mean, other than that, I think those are the issues. I think we continue to as much as we can. But again, our goal is to keep students in school, as much as possible, for so long as we can do so safely, in a way where we're educating them effectively. And we'll continue to provide as much information on that and why we're making the decisions we are as we go forward.
Thank you. And I applaud the school committee in general for, you guys never expected to be in this position and making the decisions that you guys are making. And just watching the meetings, watching the debates, I really appreciate the job the school committee is doing, as well as just the agility and ability to sort of be dynamic with how things are going, and as well as proactive in the school system. So appreciate that. I feel safe with my kids going in the hybrid model to Attleboro Public Schools, and appreciate the representation that we see on the school committee. So thank you. Anything else?
Thank you.
All right.
Not for me.
Next up, we have Counselor DeSimone. Kathleen, welcome. And
thank you, Todd.
I really loved the message you shared last week, and I encourage you to come in and either share that again or talk about just encouraging people not to be complacent.
Sure. Lucky for you, one of the best things I do is repeat myself. I have a lot of practice with 2 kids, so I'm more than happy to. And I have a little bit of a postscript. As I sit here, I'm now a few days out of quarantine. And although I really have no place to go, it's nice to know that I could go if I wanted to. I was in quarantine for 2 weeks because, as I mentioned last week, my son contracted coronavirus almost 3 weeks ago. Because we had limited our contacts, I was able to isolate it to a reasonable degree to a situation in which I think he contracted it. And I think it's important to speak about it because I think we're taking some things perhaps for granted and disregarding other things. If I'm right, my son contracted coronavirus while wearing a mask in the presence of other kids wearing masks. Masks. Got it. What wasn't present at the time was adequate social distancing and probably ventilation. I'm not sure of that because I failed to go inside the space that he was in. It was a music studio. Because I put my faith in the mask and kind of didn't think about the other 2 things, to my regret. So the first message I wanted to reiterate again is that masks are important. Everybody focuses on them, especially the absence of them, but they're not enough. They work best in the presence of social distancing and ventilation. Those 3 elements are vital, as is hand washing, of course, and watching your contact and touching your face. But I feel like the emphasis has created a kind of an over-reliance on them in the absence of those other 2 very important elements. So upon finding out that my son had contracted the virus, it got me to thinking about risk perceived and the change in reality when the risk is realized. So in the abstract, to think about the virus, oh, I don't want to get it. I don't want to get it. You don't know what it is. You just know you don't want any bit of it. Well, when it comes to your house, you suddenly realize, okay, it's here. Now what? Because it's only then when you realize that you truly have no control and no idea where it's going to go. You hear the stories on the news. Some people say it's like the flu, and for some people it is. There's a whole lot of other people, though, some of whom are young, who wind up on their backs in the hospital. That realization truly hits home when one of the people you love most in the world tests positive and you don't know how it's going to go. So I would highly suggest that people reevaluate their risk assessment. What may be okay for you as an adult may not be okay for you. You will not be able to handle that same risk in the presence of your wife, your husband, or your children. It's not the same. This virus is like a wild horse. You get on its back, good luck, because you don't know where you're going to wind up. You better hang on. We got very lucky. As I understand it, the symptoms in kids as they present do tend to be mild. That's exactly how my son's case played out. But for the first 24 to 36 hours, you don't take that for granted because you don't know. This virus, the way I understand it, and I am not a medical professional, it brings things to the surface that sometimes people were unaware of, underlying conditions or pre-existing conditions. So once we get over that hump of realizing, okay, it looks like it's going to go this way. My son was isolated in the house. There's 4 of us in a fairly modest house, but we were able to isolate him in his room, and it's not too bad. And there he's got a mini fridge and a gaming system. So he was pretty happy, but we were able to do that. And the other 3 of us in the house wore masks and no one else got sick. So there you go. I can't explain that. That to me doesn't indicate in any way that the virus is not to be taken seriously. It only points to the complete randomness and all the things that we don't know about how it travels. And I'm thankful that the rest of us were fine. And my concern going forward is as I emerge from quarantine and I look around with kind of a new view now, when you've lived it, you're like, okay, I made it, we're good. But you see things a little bit differently. And it occurred to me that we're in the bit of a perfect storm right now. And the congressman mentioned this, as I think Senator Feeney hit on it as well. We're in a perfect storm. We've got the holidays coming and the understandable urge people have to be with the people they love. They want to celebrate. You want to party. You want to get together. We have cold weather. It's driving people in, making people close the doors, close the windows. So you're in these small indoor environments. We've got COVID fatigue. We're all so sick of this journey. We want to be done. Completely understandable. And now we've got the vaccine on the horizon, like the rising sun. My concern is that not everybody, is that people might be so excited and so done that they're just going to say, okay, well, we're close enough. I'm calling it. And I would highly suggest and recommend and urge people that this is not the time to relax. If in fact this vaccine is as good as they say, all the more reason to hang on, keep your feet on the pedal and get to the finish line. None of what we've done will matter if we lose so many people along the way. It only matters if you cross the finish line. So we got to get there. So hang on, double down, don't give up. Get outside while you can, get fresh air, reach out for your friends, and ask for help if you need it. So I just want to emphasize there's some good news in the air, but we ain't there yet. We have to get there first to celebrate. So I just want to urge people, having lived it, those are all the things that I've learned upon reflection, with some regret as well. But we got through it. But now we're looking at that finish line, but we're going to hang on till we get there. So I thank you for letting me share that message again. And I hope that people take it seriously and they don't have to go through it. Just get to the finish line without learning the stuff that I had to learn personally. Take it from me. So thank you, Todd.
Thank you so much, Kathleen.
You're very welcome.
It's such an important message as we're coming up to the holidays, and we can't be complacent. We are so close. We just need to get across that finish line. So thank you so much. Does anybody have anything else to add before we close it out? All right, and so we won't be on next week. This will be it for these. Happy holidays, everybody. Stay safe and don't be complacent.
I want to say thank you, Todd. This was when we're all just wacky busy. You did it for 15 in a row when we were just learning about this and scared of it. And then it's come back. In the midst of all of this, everybody in this call, including you, is busy, scared, upside down. And you took the time to organize these. So thank you. That's a tremendous service to the community.
I appreciate that you guys are able to drop everything and join on a Sunday evening. So thank you so much. And happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you.
Thank you, Todd. Happy holidays. Happy holidays, gentlemen.
Happy holidays. Take care.